Open up your social media feed right now, and I guarantee you'll see it literally everywhere. It's the modern cult of success. You know the drill. We are just constantly bombarded with flashy stories of overnight millionaires, 20-year-old CEOs, and lifestyle gurus basically insisting that if you aren't grinding 24/7, well, you're just losing at life. But here's the thing. While those highlight reels love to show off the private jets and the sports cars, they conveniently leave out the hidden psychological toll. So in this explainer, we're diving deep into that dark side.
I want you to just pause for a second. Seriously, ask yourself, what are you actually willing to pay for that idealized version of success? I mean, is it your youth, your sanity, or maybe even your literal life? Before we can really understand why so many of us are running ourselves straight into the ground chasing this dream, we've got to peel back the psychological layers of this obsession. We're going to look at the hidden traps, the actual mathematical limits of wealth, and exactly why this whole system often makes you feel like you're losing even when you're totally winning.
Okay, let's start with level 1, the lifelong rating trap.
To really grasp where this wild obsession with being the best comes from, we actually have to go way back to your primary school classroom. Think back to first grade, right? If the teacher asked who could draw or sing, pretty much every single hand shot straight up into the air. We'd absolutely jump out of our boots just to get a shiny gold star. But fast forward to high school, and everyone's just staring at the floor. Why the change? Well, over those years, we were essentially trained to fear negative evaluation. We didn't just get a bad grade in math, it felt like our entire human worth was being judged. And the crazy part? We grew up, but we never really left that schoolyard. We just traded those gold stars for hyper-capitalist adult metrics. Today, we rank absolutely everything. We judge ourselves and everyone else by Uber scores, credit scores, Yelp reviews. We basically took an innocent schoolyard system and mutated into this massive lifelong leaderboard.
But, you know, it actually doesn't have to be this way. Just look at Finland. The Finnish education system is famous for completely avoiding daily grades. They don't put their kids through this everyday evaluation of their worth. They actually focus on learning instead of just ranking. But for the vast majority of us outside of Finland, yeah, we were conditioned from a very, very early age to tie our entire identity to getting a flawless evaluation. We look at the person standing right next to us and think, where do I stand on the master leaderboard of life? And the exact moment we do that, bam, the trap snaps shut.
Moving on to level 2, the mathematics of happiness.
Okay, so we know we're obsessed with climbing to the top of this leaderboard. But what actually happens when you get there? For years, you've probably heard about this famous happiness cap. You know, the idea that once you make around $75,000 a year, your happiness just completely flatlines. Well, economic data from researchers Stevenson and Wolfers proves that this is actually a total myth. The relationship between life satisfaction and income is what economists call a linear log relationship. The lines don't flatline at all, guys. They actually keep going up.
And taking a closer look at the global data completely confirms it. Whether you're looking at developing nations or the absolute wealthiest Western countries, life evaluation continues to rise with income. Now, it is true that each additional dollar gives a slightly smaller boost of happiness for the ultra-rich than it does for someone living in poverty. I mean, getting a $10,000 raise completely changes your life if you're making 30 grand, but it barely even registers if you're pulling in 3 million. But the key takeaway here? There is literally no absolute satiation point where happiness just stops growing.
Which brings us to a really massive contradiction, and honestly, a super provocative question. If the hard data proves that income steadily increases our life satisfaction, why on earth are so many ultra-successful, wildly wealthy people still absolutely miserable? Why doesn't the money actually feel like it's making them happier?
Well, the answer lies in 2 fascinating psychological phenomena. The first one is the hedonic treadmill. Picture this. You get a big promotion, and you feel this incredible surge of joy. But almost overnight, your baseline shifts. As your wealth goes up, your expectations and your desires rise right along with it. That luxury apartment that used to be your ultimate dream, it just becomes your normal everyday reality. You adapt. The treadmill speeds up, and suddenly you have to keep running just to feel that exact same level of satisfaction.
And then there's the second, and honestly, perhaps much more dangerous phenomenon, relative deprivation. See, we don't judge our success in absolute terms. We judge it relative to our peers. When you become successful, you naturally start hanging out with other successful people. You step into a room full of millionaires, and suddenly you feel like the poorest person in the room. Why? Because you are constantly comparing yourself to your new Joneses. Your reference group shifted. You are, quite literally, suffering from success. Every extra dollar isn't actually buying you joy anymore, it's just maintaining your status in a much more expensive peer group.
This brings us to level 3, the survivorship bias illusion.
Let's look at the logical blind spots that keep us running on this completely exhausting treadmill. Specifically, I want to talk about how we idolize the titans of the tech world. We all love a good myth, right? And society has put the successful college dropout on a massive pedestal. We're talking Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. The narrative we're constantly sold is that these guys dropped out, grinded for 100 hours a week in a dusty garage, and basically conquered the world through sheer hard work alone. And because we want that exact same success, we think we just need to copy their extreme hustle. But equating their triumph to just hard work, that's a massive analytical mistake.
We're actually falling victim to something called survivorship bias. Insights from DSP Mutual Fund highlight this perfectly. Survivorship bias is basically our very human tendency to study the winners and completely ignore the losers. It's exactly like that famous story of the World War II bombers. The military looked at the planes that returned with bullet holes and said, hey, let's put heavy armor right where the holes are. But a brilliant mathematician named Abraham Wald pointed out a fatal flaw. They were only looking at the planes that survived. The planes that got hit in the engines, they never made it back to be studied. When we only look at the billionaires, we are literally just looking at the planes that survived the anti-aircraft fire.
Tens of thousands. That right there is the silent truth. For every single successful college dropout entrepreneur we celebrate on the cover of a glossy magazine, there are tens of thousands of silent, accompanying failures that we completely ignore. Mistaking the winners for the rule, rather than realizing they are the extreme exception, is absolutely fatal to our understanding of how success actually works.
Success isn't just about grinding until you collapse. And startup survival rates completely prove it. Check this out. Businesses nurtured by incubators, meaning they have early access to funding, high-level mentorship, and elite networks, they boast an 87% survival rate past 5 years. But non-incubated startups, they're sitting at just 44%. Success heavily relies on systemic advantages, timing, and who you know. When we ignore all of that and convince ourselves it's 100% just about our own personal hustle, we are setting ourselves up for a really profound disappointment.
Finally, we reach level 4, the true cost of perfection.
Which brings us to the final and definitely the most crucial layer of this explainer. What actually happens to our minds when we strive for this rigged, idealized version of success? Well, psychologists break perfectionism down into 2 main types: socially prescribed perfectionism, or SPP, and self-oriented perfectionism, SOP. Self-oriented is when you set really high standards for yourself because you are genuinely internally motivated. But socially prescribed perfectionism, that's striving to meet the impossible, often completely imaginary standards of other people. It's doing it for the gram, for your parents, for that imaginary leaderboard we talked about.
And guys, the research on this is incredibly sobering. Psychometric testing shows that striving to meet these external, socially prescribed standards just drains your mental resources at an alarming rate. It leads directly to severe emotional exhaustion. But you want to know the cruelest part? It leads to chronic professional ineffectiveness. This basically means that even when you are achieving amazing things, your brain flat out refuses to process it as a win. You feel this constant sensation of inadequate professional competence. You could literally be making millions of dollars and your brain will still be whispering that you are an absolute fraud. That right there is the true hidden toll of the hustle.
So, how do we actually break free from all of this? Well, we have to fundamentally reframe our narrative around failure. As highlighted in recent research on entrepreneurial resilience, failure should absolutely not be a mark against your human worth. It is just an essential, iterative mechanism. Think about it. Every single successful person you admire has failed, and often quite spectacularly. But they didn't view that failure as an endpoint, they viewed it as data. They used it to build their resilience. If we can just detach our ego and our self-worth from those daily grades, we can actually start to enjoy the process of building something that's genuinely meaningful to us.
I want to leave you with this final important thought. Take a hard look at your own life, your own goals, your own hustle, and seriously ask yourself, are you playing a game that is actually designed to be won on your own terms? Or are you just running on a treadmill that society built to never ever stop? It might just be time to redefine your own personal metrics for happiness before you end up paying the ultimate price for someone else's version of success.